Now, what is the design behind it? So remember, in design factors, we're looking at token policy, financial incentives, and architecture, and math. Token policy is the attributes of the token. We're looking at monetary policy as well as how do we value tokens. Financial incentives, we're looking at incentive features such as your platform activities and return to stake or return of investment. And architecture, we're looking at the design of the structure, design of the token structure. We're looking at property rights as well as lockup periods. And then distribution and also some math. The algorithm that defines the structure of the tokens. So let's get started with monetary policy. Monetary policy is how tokens are governed. Because there are two tokens in the system, we have liquid tokens and relay tokens. So the purple table or the purple circle they are all talking about the tokens I'm referring to, and then the pink one is on the topic, and then the explanation is found below. So monetary policy, the first thing that we have to talk about is money and supply. Price and supply of the liquid token. This is executed by a smart contract with a mathematical formula. It changes the supply and price of tokens in the Bangkok ecosystem. And when we talk about Bangkok ecosystem, we're talking about primary market. That means these tokens interact directly in Bangkok's ecosystem. If we're talking about secondary market, as in you want to take BNT, the liquid token, and trade it on other exchanges, go for it. You can do that. But we're not talking about how that is being governed in secondary market. We're talking about how prices and supply of BNT's token is defined in the primary market. Why? Because the only way to get more supply of the token is via the platform itself. So the price is dependent on the supply, and you can't increase more BNT tokens outside of the ecosystem, because the only place that creates BNT tokens is the smart contract on BNT's ecosystem. So then it doesn't change the price that much. So everything else in the secondary market, it's price, valuation, everything. That's not what we're going to talk about in monetary policy. The other thing to remember is the reserve ratio. Reserve ratio is basically the exchange rate that we talked about just now. When you go to the exchange, the money changer, he can charge you a different exchange rate from the rest of the other money changers. This is what will not happen because the reserve ratio is fixed. The exchange rate is fixed for liquid tokens. So this is a fixed ratio between the value, the token's value, and the value of the reserve pool. So the prices, because the token is fixed, the ratio is fixed, supply of tokens change, so prices will also change. But it will always change to make sure that the reserve ratio is fixed. And it's possible to create a new relay. So remember, relay is the reserve pool, 50% BNT, 50% reserve token. It's possible to create a new relay, and then when you create a new relay, you can have a corresponding relay token that's out there, and you need a minimum value in the reserve of $20,000. That's how it works here. Then we talk about valuation. So this is the price level of tokens. We talk about token bonding curve and what's the math behind that. So when we talk about token bonding curve, we're talking about liquid tokens in particular, which is your BNT. And the price of liquid token price is defined by the supply times alpha. Alpha is a function of the reserve token, and E is a natural number, and A can be any constant. So basically, E to the power of A it's just a constant, and we're really focusing on how price is a function of supply, and alpha is a function of the reserve ratio. So this formula, we explain it. We've explained the formula. I explained the formula in the token economics model, token economics paper of Bangkok. So this is the price that we're talking about. This is how price is determined, and the cost to purchase liquid tokens using reserve token is So this is the conversion formula. If I want to buy BNT tokens and I have 10 DAI, how many BNT tokens do I get? So this is where it comes in. This is the formula anyway. So E equals RO, which is the initial reserve, and F is the reserve ratio, which is your exchange rate, and then you get this function. So that's the mathematical formula that I'm talking about. Then we also talk about how do we value relay tokens. So relay tokens are valued based on the value of the reserve pool, so the price of reserve pool. Price of reserve pool is 50% BNT, 50% reserve tokens. So you add them together, that's the value of the reserve pool. And if you own 10% of the reserve token, or if there are 10 relay tokens to represent the reserve pool, each relay token is 10%. Pretty straightforward. And this is financial incentives. So the perks of using the platform. So one, we are talking about price slippage, transaction fees, and liquidity mechanism. For price slippage is basically the change in prices. So can you imagine if the tokens are, when you're in a reserve pool, you have 50% BNT, 50% DAI. The prices are based on each other's value. So one DAI can be 0.3 BNT. I'm just giving an example. I don't know what's the exchange rate. Or maybe the ratio is one DAI is 0.3 BNT. And as you have, as the things change, although the exchange rate is the same, the price would differ. Exchange rate is fixed, but prices differ. And when you have very little tokens, a very little DAI and very little BNT in your reserve pool, the price will change even more because you don't have a lot of reserve, very little reserve, and so the relative change is much greater. So what you want to do, we want to make sure that price slippage is less. We want to increase the reserve pool and make the reserve pool bigger. That's why we have relay tokens to contribute to the reserve pool. Relay tokens then can. Why would relay tokens do that? Because they can earn transaction fees. So they can charge the transaction fees, and the transaction fees will be given to these relay token holders. This fee is determined by the person who created the reserve pool, and this can be between 0.1 and 0.3%. And lastly, it's liquidity mechanisms for the liquid tokens. So the smart contract governs it and will burn and mint consistently. So it will burn and mint according to the formulas here, the token bonding curve formulas that we talked about. And what about the other financial incentives? We look at returns. So more perks. So just now was perks, now it's more perks. So you have arbitrage, transaction fees again, and stable USDB. So talked about arbitrage. I said that it's possible that the secondary market can have different price of BNT. So maybe BNT is listed on other exchanges and the price is different from BNT in Bangkor's ecosystem. So that is when arbitrage could exist, where your buy and sell prices are different. So I can buy from one place and sell it from another and earn the difference. So this could happen, but it will not happen for long because there are a lot of traders or there are a lot of people who are looking for such opportunities because it's risk-free. People are looking for these opportunities to go out, buy them, and sell them so that they will make the spread, they will make the difference, and they will continue until it levels up. Then there'll be no arbitrage anymore. So this is something that could exist. This is something that could happen, but it will not last for long. The other one is transaction fees. As I mentioned, you get transaction fees every time someone transacts in the reserve pool. So if you have DAI BNT, anytime someone transacts DAI in the DAI BNT or BNT in the DAI BNT reserve pool, you get a transaction fee. But if you have DAI BNT and someone is transacting bet BNT, you don't get any transaction fees. You don't get any returns. And lastly, this is something very, very new actually. It's looking at a different version of BNT. So we have a stable USDB. So that is basically a derivative of BNT. It's a stable version of BNT. Why do we want to do that? Because if we have a pool that has BNT and the reserve token, both of them are quite volatile. So if the reserve pool has two tokens that are volatile, then it makes the thing in general quite volatile, because if you have so many variables affecting. So what we want to do here is to reduce the volatility by replacing BNT with a stable USDB. So USDB is a liquid token as well, and it's used in the ecosystem. And so now we move to the third pillar, which is architecture, property rights. It's the rights of the token. So when we talk about liquid tokens, there is not much rights because it's basically a utility token. It allows you to access into the platform, into the different reserve pools of the different reserve tokens. So there is no property rights except just the rights to exchange, to liquidate, but that's not exactly a right, that's just a property. But we have property rights for relay tokens. So relay tokens have the rights to be entitled to future cash flow generated from transaction fees incurred. Because relay tokens are staking relay tokens in the reserve pool, and every time there is transactions, they get a cut from it. And we also want to talk about distribution. How is Bancor distributed? So there's a total supply. It's a strange number of liquid tokens. There's a supply limit of liquid tokens. There's no supply limit of other tokens. So the supply limit of liquid tokens is a little bit more than 75 million, almost 76 million. How is it allocated? 10%. You have 20% of ETH reserve pool for BNT, 40% tech R&D, 12% marketing, 10% admin, 18% operations. More details can be found in the report as share more about what do they mean by all these functions. And lastly, it's the math part, it's the algorithm. So it's how do you mathematically build the mathematical building blocks of the token? What is included, how it's being defined. So we're going to look at price formula, conversion formula, and reserve ratio. Price formula, and they're all relating to the liquid token itself. Price formula, as we mentioned, it's about using token bonding curves, and this is the general summary of functions. The paper goes deeper into explaining the different steps to get there. Conversion formula talks about how, if I have X number of reserve tokens and I want to exchange them for BNT tokens, how many BNT tokens do I get? So this is the formula you use when you want to convert, and it's based on the price formula. And reserve ratio, it's the exchange rate. And we can have exchange rate between 0 and 1. And what does it mean when your exchange rate is 1? What does it mean when it's 0.5? What does it mean when it's before 0.5? What does it mean when it's after 0.5? This is what we're going to share a little bit more about. So when we talk about the liquid tokens, when we are looking at the reserve ratio, the reserve ratio is the exchange rate, yeah? Reserve ratio is the value of reserve token over the market value of liquid tokens. Market value of liquid tokens is the price times supply of liquid tokens. So the value of reserve token, let's say let's look at a reserve ratio of 0.5, so half. So the value of reserve tokens will be the value of DAI. So maybe DAI is $100 worth of DAI. And the market value of liquid token has to be 200 because it has to be, the ratio has to be half, right? So market value has to be 2 times the reserve token. And market value of liquid token means the price times supply of BNT. And then, so that's the general formula of that's how we get started. That's how we start with the reserve ratio. And the price of liquid token is basically you just rearrange that. You get value of reserve token divided by supply of liquid tokens times reserve token. And if you do a bit of expansion and you do a bit of playing around, which the paper goes step by step into, then you get this formula where price is the supply times a function of the exchange rate. It's 1 over F minus 1. And E to the power of A is just a constant. It's just a number. It's a variable. It's like 10. It's a function that just is there. So A can be 0 or A can be 10. It doesn't matter. You can customize it any way you want. So based on that price, we create the conversion formula. So if I have some tokens, how do I have some DAI, I want to change them for BNT. How much BNT do I get? You can't just use the formula because every time you change 1 unit of supply, the price change. So it's not possible for you to calculate one supply change, what's the price? One supply, the other supply change, what's the price? And calculate like that. It's too tedious. So you basically use some math to get it. So now price, let's assume that e to the power of a, the constant, is just 1. Let's make this a lot easier. So the price equals the change in supply. So S is the new supply over S0 is the old supply to the power of A, and then you times old price. So this is the new price. And then the new payable amount is this function that we talked about just now. We showed you there. And the expansion and getting to there, it's basically integrating area under the curve based on this new pricing, and you get this function. E is the cost payable. E is the reserve tokens payable, and this is what you get. And based on this, you rearrange. So you make T the subject and you move everything to the other side, and you get this function. So this is a new supply. So it's S0 as in the old supply, and 1 plus E. E is the reserve token, so like E is DAI, and R0 is the previous value of DAI, previous market value of all the DAI available in the reserve token. F is the exchange rate, so it could be 0.5, and minus 1. So this is the new token supply. So this is the formula where you can find out if you have X amount of DAI, how much BNT you get. And lastly, you see there's alpha and F are both part of the reserve, are functions of the reserve ratio. F is the reserve ratio, alpha is a function. That means alpha is the reserve ratio plus minus some numbers. So why do we want to talk about reserve ratio? Because it affects the shape of the curve. The reserve ratio is between 0 and 1. And so the curve really changes. It goes, when it's 1, it's like item is pegged, the liquid token is pegged at a 1-to-1 rate. So it's just a straight line. And the prices don't change. The supply can keep changing, but the price don't change. When it's 0.5, the prices move linearly with supply. So it's just a straight line. Let's see. Let me draw that. So it's just a straight line like that, an upward sloping straight line. So as prices increase, supply will increase. When it's 0.5, I use a different color. I hope you can see that. When it's between 0 and 0.5, the prices increase slowly, then increase super fast. You see? At first, prices increase real slow, and then poof, it goes up super quick. And we have the other one where it's between 0 and 1, where prices increase super fast, and then it kind of flattens out. So the green one, it increases quite fast, and then it just kind of flattens out. So these are the different shape of the curve. And okay, the red line, this is when it's equals to 1. So you can see that the reserve ratio actually matters a lot. The reserve ratio is the exchange rate, the fixed exchange rate. It matters a lot because it changes the whole shape of the curve. And right now we talked about the different shapes of the curve. If they're good, they're bad. What's the deal with them? In two lessons ago, so 2 or 3 lessons ago. So you can go and check that if you forgot. But basically, because liquid tokens, BNT doesn't earn any revenue. It's just there as a pure exchange mechanism. So we are using this straight upward sloping curve. This is where the reserve ratio is 0.5. The reserve ratio is 0.5, upward sloping curve, and this is the reserve ratio that is kept in Bancor's ecosystem. More details are available on the token paper, which is where you're going to get it now. So if you can scan the QR code, you can find the Bancor token economics paper. It's read by the Bancor's team, so it's also edited to provide more accuracy. You can go to economicsdesign.com/portfolio/Bancor.